He sat beneath the crumbling awning of an abandoned bookstore, wrapped in layers of worn fabric, eyes fixed on a world that never seemed to notice him. This city moved like a machine, impatient, loud, and blind. People brushed past him daily, their steps quick, their eyes averted. Elijah had become part of the urban landscape, no more significant than a lamppost or a crack in the pavement. Yet behind those quiet, weathered eyes lived a man who saw everything. He noticed the single mother struggling to carry groceries and heard her children across a busy intersection. He watched the teenagers sitting alone in the park, trembling from something far deeper than cold. Elijah was always there, silent, observant, forgotten. The streets were cruel, sirens cried in the night, laughter often carried a tone of desperation. And yet, amidst the chaos, Elijah remained still, as if waiting. Nobody ever asked his name. Children were pulled closer when they walked by. Some muttered that he was crazy, others assumed he was drunk, but Elijah was neither. What he was hidden. People judged the smell of his clothes, the dirt on his hands, the tangled beard. But they couldn't see what those things had survived. They couldn't know how long he'd lived without comfort, by choice. Not because he had no place to go, but because he had something to do. Every day, while the city turned its face away, Elijah kept watching. He remembered things people forgot. How to listen without speaking, how to see without judging. And when the moment came, as it always did, he would rise. Quietly, calmly, just in time. The first time anyone noticed him, truly noticed, wasn't because he spoke, but because of what he did. It was early morning, the kind of gray dawn where everything feels suspended in silence. A woman shouted suddenly, her voice sharp and panicked. Her little boy, no older than 6, had broken free from her grasp and darted toward the street, chasing a plastic ball that had rolled off the curb. The screech of tires tore through the quiet. But before anyone could scream, before the driver could even react, a little ball dofta moved. No one saw where he came from. One moment he was part of the background, the next, he was in motion, a blur of brown coats and urgency. He reached the boy just in time, snatching him from the street and stumbling back onto the sidewalk. The car whooshed by, missing them by inches. The boy cried. The mother sobbed. And Elijah, without a word, gently placed the child into her arms and walked away. No thanks, no attention. He didn't linger. By the time people gathered, he had already disappeared into the city's shadows. Witnesses argued later about what they saw. Some said he was a ghost. Others claimed he vanished like smoke, but the mother remembered his eyes, tired, calm, knowing. That moment, though barely mentioned in the news, was the first ripple. Something invisible had moved beneath the surface of the city. A stranger, unwanted and unseen, had just rewritten the story of a family's life. And though no one knew his name, Elijah had begun his quiet mission again, walking the streets like a guardian the world had forgotten it needed. Stories began to spread, not through headlines or broadcasts, but through whispers. A woman who found her stolen purse placed neatly at her doorstep the next morning. A young man who received a sudden hand on his shoulder just as he was about to leap from a bridge. A taxi driver who, after collapsing from exhaustion at the wheel, awoke safely on the sidewalk, a coat draped over him and his keys beside him. In each tale, there was one common thread. A quiet man with a beard, old boots, and eyes that seemed to carry every sorrow in the world. But no one could agree on where he came from or where he went. He was always gone before questions could be asked. The city, so used to ignoring what it didn't understand, now found itself listening. People started noticing small things. A handprint on a foggy glass, a coat left behind, a stranger who never returned for his food. Elijah never asked for anything. He never spoke of what he did. But somehow those he touched couldn't forget him. He moved like a shadow, not to hide, but to serve. His kindness never demanded recognition. It existed only for the moment it was needed. As these stories piled up, a strange reverence began to grow around the mystery man. He was no longer just a homeless figure, he became a symbol of compassion, of hope, of unseen sacrifice. And yet, even as people whispered about miracles and guardian angels, Elijah kept walking. His mission wasn't to be found. It was to be there, at the right moment, when no one else was. Her name was Mara, a nurse who worked night shifts at the county hospital. She had seen more pain than most people could stomach. Terminal diagnoses, lonely deaths, children fading in sterile rooms. But nothing compared to the pain of losing her own son to a sudden illness. After the funeral, she returned to work, because sitting in silence only made the grief louder. But the weight never left her. One night, unable to endure the emptiness inside, she wandered to a park bench after her shift, thinking, perhaps hoping she wouldn't go home again. That's where she saw him. Elijah sat 2 benches away, unmoving, his gaze soft but heavy. He didn't speak. He didn't approach. For a long time, they just existed in the same space, strangers bound by silence. Then slowly, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, an origami crane, delicately folded from hospital paper. He walked to her, and placed it beside her hand without a word. His eyes met hers for a brief second. No smile, no pity, just presence. Then he turned and left. Mara held the crane for hours. She cried, not because of the gesture, but because it was the first time she had felt seen since her son died. That tiny bird made from scraps reminded her that beauty could still exist, even in pain. The next morning, she shared her story in a support group. Someone recorded it. The video went viral within days. People didn't just cry, they searched. They wanted to know who this man was. But Elijah, as always, had vanished like mist in morning light. It was a rainy afternoon when the city finally caught a glimpse of him, not with their own eyes but through the lens of a security camera. A man had stumbled too close to the edge of a subway platform, headphones in, unaware that the train was already rushing into the station. The footage was blurry but clear enough. Elijah appeared from the far corner, moving with sudden urgency. He didn't shout, he didn't hesitate. He simply lunged forward and pulled the man back a heartbeat before the train roared past. Then, as always, he turned and walked away, slipping into the crowd before anyone could react. That single moment, captured in 30 seconds of silent footage, exploded online. News anchors debated his identity. Blogs dubbed him the Phantom Samaritan. The man he saved tried to find him for days, posting flyers that read, "You saved my life. Please let me thank you." But no answer ever came. Elijah had no interest in applause. To him, it wasn't heroism, it was duty. He had watched the world long enough to know how quickly a second could change everything. And so, he stayed ready. The footage became a symbol. People watched it again and again, marveling not just at the act, but at the way he disappeared, as if he didn't want to belong to the world he just protected. For the first time, the city began to ask, not who he was, but why he did it. What kind of man gives so much and asks for nothing? And where had he come from? The answers, they hoped, would come soon. But Elijah was already gone. The story had outgrown whispers. Now it filled newspapers, radio segments, even international broadcasts. "Who is the man saving strangers across the city?" read one headline. Another called him the silent guardian. People shared personal stories online, some vague, others detailed. A woman recalled how her runaway daughter was guided back home after a gentle encounter with a bearded man who gave her a sandwich and simply said, "They're still waiting for you." A local journalist began piecing together the encounters, creating a map of where Elijah had last been seen. There was no clear pattern. Parks, alleys, hospitals, subways. It was as if he appeared wherever he was needed. Curiosity turned to obsession. Influencers posted videos trying to find the hero. Street artists painted murals of him with angel wings. Still, no one knew his name. No official records matched his face. No shelters had him registered. It was as if he existed only between moments, like a breath between crises. What fascinated people most wasn't just what he did, but how he made them feel. Those who met him spoke of an odd calm, as if he carried something sacred, something the rest of the world had lost. He never preached. He never judged. He showed up, helped, and left, always disappearing before gratitude could find him. The more they searched, the more the mystery deepened. Elijah had become more than a man. He was now a symbol, a question mark drawn across the heart of a city learning, perhaps for the first time, what quiet goodness truly looked like. And then, just as quickly as he had entered the city's consciousness, Elijah vanished. No more sightings. No more quiet rescues. The man who had once moved like a silent thread through the city's fabric was simply gone. Days passed. Then weeks. The streets seemed colder without him. Not in temperature, but in spirit. People began to feel his absence in ways they didn't expect. A man hesitated before crossing a busy road, glancing around for a face he didn't see. A child cried in a park, and several strangers approached, not out of instinct, but as if trying to fill the void he left behind. The city had unknowingly become better in his presence, and now they felt the loss. Local news ran nightly segments asking, "Where is the man who saved strangers?" Candlelight vigils were held in parks where he had once been spotted. Flyers were posted with his blurred image from the subway video. Some claimed to see him in other cities. Others believed he had died, but no body was found. No witnesses came forward. Just silence. The mayor issued a public statement, honoring the unknown man, calling him a reminder that greatness wears no uniform. Still, no one came forward. It was as if Elijah had never existed, except for the lives he changed. And those lives, now forever altered, carried a new kind of ache. Not just gratitude, but longing. For a man they never really knew, yet somehow, had come to depend on. His disappearance became the city's quiet sorrow. And every empty bench, every corner alley seemed to ask the same question: where did he go? It was a small boy named Lucas who brought the city a clue. He was no reporter, no officer, just a child with large eyes and a folded piece of paper clutched tightly in his hand. He appeared at the steps of a local news station one morning, accompanied by his grandmother, saying he had something important to share. The anchor almost didn't listen, until she saw the name written on the envelope, "To the world if I ever disappear." Inside was a handwritten letter, slightly stained, creased from being folded and unfolded many times. Lucas explained that he had met Elijah months ago, near the shelter where his grandmother volunteered. They had become friends in silence, sharing snacks, stories, and drawings. One day, Elijah handed him the letter and said, "If I'm ever gone, this is yours to give." The contents stunned everyone. In careful script, Elijah had written not about his identity, but about his purpose. He spoke of a past filled with success, of losing everything in one night, and of choosing to walk away from the life he once had. "I wasn't lost," the letter read. "I stepped down so I could see the ground better. People look down on the homeless, but from down here, I saw everything they missed." He explained that he never wanted recognition. He only wanted to remind the world that no one is truly invisible, and that even the smallest acts of kindness can alter the course of a life. The letter ended with a simple line, "Don't find me, be me." And with that, a child's hands had delivered more than just a letter. They had reignited the soul of a city. The letter opened doors long thought sealed. Journalists and amateur investigators dove deeper, cross-referencing missing persons, old medical records, and scattered witness accounts. It was a retired nurse who made the connection first. While watching the evening news, she saw the subway footage again, and froze. She recognized the gait, the posture, the way the man's hand curled slightly inward when he moved. "That's Dr. Elijah Rowan," she whispered to her husband. She hadn't seen him in over a decade. Once a renowned trauma surgeon, Elijah had vanished after a devastating accident claimed the lives of his wife and young son. Colleagues said he walked out of the hospital one night and never returned. His home was later found emptied, his bank accounts donated entirely to children's charities. No note, no farewell. Just silence. Until now. The media quickly pieced the story together. The man saving strangers on the streets was the same man who had once saved lives in operating rooms. It was almost too poetic to believe. But the evidence was undeniable. Photos confirmed the match. A few former patients even recalled his voice. He had traded surgical gloves for street dust, scalpel precision for quiet timing. His mission never changed, only the setting did. People wept not just for the tragedy that broke him, but for the grace with which he rebuilt himself. Not as a symbol, not as a hero, but as a man who chose to give, again and again in the shadows. His story wasn't just rediscovered, it was reborn. The revelation sent shockwaves through every corner of the city, and far beyond. Former colleagues, now older and grayer, came forward with the stories of the Elijah they once knew. Dr. Thompson, a retired surgeon, recounted how Elijah would work triple shifts without complaint, often paying out of pocket for patients who couldn't afford care. A hospital janitor recalled how Elijah once sat with a dying man for hours, long after visiting hours ended, simply because the man had no family. He was always different, they said. He felt things more deeply. The accident that claimed his wife and son had shattered something inside him. Therapy hadn't helped. Time hadn't softened the grief. One day he simply disappeared. Many assumed he had taken his own life, but instead Elijah had rewritten his existence. He chose a new path, one without title, paycheck, or recognition, and yet, the essence of who he was remained unchanged. A healer, a watcher, a protector. As the truth surfaced, the medical community held a candlelight vigil in his honor. Hundreds gathered outside the hospital where he once worked, holding signs that read, "Thank you, Dr. Rowan, and you never stopped saving us." No one knew where he was, but it didn't matter. His legacy had already etched itself into the heart of the city. People began volunteering more, helping quietly, leaving food for those in need, just as he had done. Elijah had become more than a story. He had become a movement. And in the lives he touched, he was still very much alive. Months passed, and though Elijah was still nowhere to be found, his presence lingered like a sacred echo in the rhythm of daily life. Inspired by his story, the city council approved the construction of a monument, not a grand statue in the center of town, but something quieter, truer to who he was. In a small park where he was often seen sitting alone, the community built a simple stone bench beneath a flowering tree. Behind it stood a modest sculpture, just a cloaked figure, faceless, gazing gently toward the horizon. There was no plaque with his name, no heroic inscription. Only one line was etched into the stone: "For the one who saved without being seen." People came not to take selfies or make noise, but to sit, to reflect, to leave flowers, letters, origami cranes. Some came to grieve, others came to thank. The bench became a sanctuary, not just for memory but for transformation. In its quietness, it taught what Elijah had embodied, that kindness doesn't need applause to matter. Children asked their parents, "Why doesn't he have a name?" And the answer was always the same: because he didn't want one. The city slowly changed, not through policy or law, but through action. People held doors longer. They listened more. They offered help without waiting to be asked. Elijah had started a ripple not with speeches but with silence. And now that silence was filled with meaning. The men they couldn't find had led them back to something they'd forgotten: how to care, without needing to be seen. It was nearly a year later, when the world caught its final glimpse of him. A winter night had settled over a distant city, quiet and sharp with cold. A security camera from a corner market captured the moment. A young mother sat on a curb, arms wrapped around her shivering child, both wearing thin clothes not made for the frost. People passed by, some glancing, most ignoring. Then from the edge of the frame he appeared. Elijah, same coat, same posture, a little grayer, a little slower. He knelt beside them, removed his own blanket, and wrapped it around the child. Then he placed something in the mother's hand, No one could see what it was. She looked up to thank him, but he was already walking away. As he passed under the street light, he turned, just for a second, and looked directly at the camera. His eyes were tired, yes, but they were also peaceful. Then he disappeared into the falling snow, his figure swallowed by the city's endless motion. The footage made its way online. And though it lacked the drama of his earlier rescues, it became the most cherished of all. Because in that moment, Elijah wasn't a mystery or a myth. He was a man, worn, imperfect, real, still giving what little he had to someone with even less. That night, thousands watched the clip, not with tears of sadness, but of understanding. Elijah didn't want to be remembered with statues or stories. He wanted to remind us all of something simple and powerful. You don't need to be known to matter, you just need to care. And somewhere out there, in another city, on another night, someone like him is still watching.